Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Football Diary podcast. It's Mike here with Dave today on a sunny bank holiday weekend, which produced some cheer at last for Nottingham Forest. They beat Sheffield United 3-1 to seize the initiative in the relegation battle, as rivals Luton and Burnley both dropped points. We'll be discussing their performance as well as Tottenham, who lost again 4-2 against Liverpool. Luckily for Aston Villa, who themselves actually lost to Brighton as well in the top four race. We'll be looking at Ipswich Town as well, promoted to the Premier League for the first time in 22 years and after back-to-back promotions. But I feel like we have to start with Spurs, Dave. First of all, I think 4 games in a row they've lost in the league now, isn't it? And suddenly their drive to the top 4 has fallen by the wayside. It looks near on impossible now, apart from Aston Villa capitulating really for them to get top 4. I'm trying to pinpoint what's gone wrong because they had some highlights and some good points in this game against Liverpool, which I think Ange Postecoglou kind of acknowledged. But generally, defensively, they looked really sloppy, didn't they?
I think it's a culmination of things, really. I think if you look particularly at the players, the key players for the first portion of the season, like, Van der Ven, Maddison, Son, those three in particular, they were, integral really to what they were doing and when they were playing really well. Obviously, Maddison had that really unfortunate injury, and then obviously Van der Ven had some problems as well. Since they've come back, they've not really looked like in the kind of form that they were previous, along with their defensive frailties. And, it's absolutely magnified in this game from both sides, really, to be honest. The defending was awful. They just couldn't defend crosses. If you look, majority of the goals came from crosses, albeit obviously apart from a spectacular strike from Harvey Elliott. Probably one of the goals of the season, to be honest. But they seem to just lack a bit of structure at the minute, and we knew this was going to be a tough run for them. We've mentioned it over the last couple of weeks, haven't we? That they've got a really tough end to the end of the season. It's really going to sort of show us what they're made of, and I just don't know whether they've got enough there in terms of strength in depth, really, when there's players who are out of form, whether other players are going to step up, because it's not really looking like that at the present time.
Well, I feel like the first 11's let them down lately, and it might be down to just the amount of games they've played and trying to recover and get their best form back from injury. But the defensive line I thought looked really vulnerable, and that is a surprise how many goals Tottenham have conceded this season, especially in the last 5 or 6 games, which has been a surprise because I think Tottenham's new way of playing under Ange Postecoglou has been pretty open. They played this very high line, but I think that got exposed so many times against Liverpool, didn't it? Where they just didn't attempt to contain Liverpool at all. It felt like there were so many gaps at the back. The press wasn't working. And you could see for the last couple of games, Ange Postecoglou just on the touchline screaming and getting frustrated with his players, saying, stay higher, pass forwards. And it felt like they were going against those instructions sometimes. Do you think that's anything to do with fatigue at all? Because I know you said Liverpool are kind of in the same boat, really. They looked a little bit lethargic. And a few teams that we'll talk about today, I think you could probably say that the fixture schedules affected them in some way. But I think Tottenham especially, they looked a bit leggy to me. I don't know about you.
I don't know if you can have that argument though, because they've not played a great amount of football compared to some of the other teams. Like, you look at Villa, look at their fixture, list of. They've found it tough recently, but they've got a lot more fixtures than what Spurs have. So I just think it's. You mentioned the defending was bad. Emerson Royale was awful, especially for that first goal for the Salah. Just completely ignored his run. He looked behind him, took one look at him, and it was just so casual. And I think that's the worrying thing for me, really. It does seem to be very casual in terms of their urgency in defending in numbers. Not just that, but winning second balls. They just really struggled to get a foothold. But didn't really look like they had the focus in the game to. It wasn't until later in the game they really threatened at all, really. And that's got to be worrying, knowing that you've still got an opportunity to make inroads on Villa. You've still got a game in hand now. Such a pivotal time of the season when they can still get Champions League football, but they just seem to lack that sort of mentality to get to the finish line.
It's funny, if you looked at the season on its head, and kind of Tottenham started in the way they're finishing now, and were struggling, losing games. But then they started this season by winning loads in a row. Imagine if they finished the season that way. Fifth would suddenly look like a really positive season for them, and I think in some ways you'd have taken fifth. They'd have taken fifth as well as a finish, and it looks like that's probably their most likely position to finish. Although there are a couple of teams chasing them behind, aren't there? So you can kind of look at this season as a whole and go, maybe this is progress for them finishing where they have finished, if they do end up finishing there. But I think just the way they've started and the way they've played at their best makes this more frustrating for me, because they can attack so much better. And I think a lot of the results they've had that have been really good have been that they've just outscored their opponents, and going forward it's just clicked. But like you say, James Maddison hasn't been quite the same since he's come back. Son had to dig deep to get his goal today and in this game. And maybe that's the thing they need to work on, is just going forwards consistently and attacking consistently to kind of offset the defence being so far off the pace. There is an element of danger in the way Spurs play, isn't there, defensively? But they need to kind of score goals as well. And like you say, until very late in the game, it didn't look like that was going to happen.
I mean, even Romero in this game, he looked off it. Like, he got beat numerous times in the air. Gakpo, leaped right above him and obviously scored a really good header, but there was just no fight. And
yeah,
I think from the last few games that they've lost, I think one of them, with the exception of the Arsenal game, where actually I thought they played quite well. I thought they were probably a little bit unfortunate, maybe, to not get anything from that game. And I think you've got to question their sort of professionalism and mentality there, because if they can only turn up for a derby game, against obviously their closest rivals, but then they're not going to show the same sort of fight and urgency in the rest of the games, which are all equally as important, then you've got to kind of question whether they've got that sort of mettle to be able to be in the Champions League to begin with. So it's a big missed opportunity for me, because Villa have dropped points. You look at their last few games, they've not looked quite as good as they have done earlier in the season. They've had their issues as well. Obviously, they played a lot of football, had injuries as well. So it's been a real tough fight, hasn't it? Really, the end of the season, it's been a bit of a struggle for both teams, if we're being honest.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It doesn't feel like it's a fight now. It feels like both teams have almost slumbered to the finish line. Tried to get the most out of the teams that are no doubt exhausted, both of them.
Well, I think if you look at the Tottenham's last three games, I think they've got Burnley and Sheffield United, haven't they? Which you anticipate they're gonna get 6 points from those games, and probably the next game they've got Burnley, they'll probably that relegate them effectively, and I think Villa have still got a couple of difficult games. Got to play Liverpool, haven't they? Still,
yeah.
So I mean, it's still possible, but it would have been, even if they'd have got a couple of points from this run of games, would have given them a much bigger opportunity than what they have. It just feels like both teams are stumbling to the finish line. It seems like it's going to kind of peter out a little bit.
Yeah, it's a shame, because I think for the neutral, you're looking for these rivalries, and you're looking for this narrative as you go into this last stretch of the season. But Villa will be thrilled, because they rode their luck really by dropping points to Brighton, who actually gave Villa a real scare, didn't they? They could have scored more, I think, and if it wasn't for Robin Olsen, who'd have thought Villa probably would have let in more goals. But Brighton scored with a penalty. I think Olsen was unlucky not to actually keep the ball out completely. He just happened to parry it, the penalty, into João Pedro's path, didn't he? Which is really unfortunate. But Villa will be a massive sigh of relief, really, after this result for Tottenham, especially. And it's a bit of a reprieve for them. And it does look like it's theirs to throw away now, doesn't it? Which, you wouldn't rule out again after the way this season's playing so far. Yeah,
it's been obviously a difficult last couple of weeks for Villa. I think particularly, the European game would have been a real... would have been a real sickener for them, I think, and how that game panned out. But they've had opportunities in the league the last couple of weeks just to put it to bed.
Yeah.
Obviously against Chelsea, being in the position they were in that game. And I do think that the football, the amount of minutes is just taking its toll on fitness now.
Definitely.
And the injuries that they've had, I think it's become quite a lot for them. And let's be honest, they've had a great season. From the beginning of the season, if you saw this is where they'd end up, I think a lot of people would have questioned you if you'd have said they're going to get Champions League football. But they're still well in the driving seat. One thing that we have seen is Emery has actually managed to get a reaction from this team when they've had bad results. So I don't doubt. I still think they'll achieve the top four finish, and it'd be really fascinating to see how next season goes. Obviously, this game again, they were just off the pace again, really off the pace. And do you know what? It's actually I find it quite funny, to be fair, because Miles said on the pod last week. You mentioned now Brighton have been on this absolutely terrible run, and it's just funny how it works. And they're obviously the team to become Villa's undoing and score their first goal, I think, in over a month. Which is
they've really struggled for goals. Well, Olsen kept them in it, and I think also you mentioned their lack of energy. I think the energy of John McGinn especially almost kept any attacking impetus they had, and he's been the driving force for them when they have struggled. And the problem is, I think you look at the stats for this game against Brighton, and they only have one shot on target. That's not like Villa at all with the attacking talent they've got. So that'll be a concern, especially when they've got to go to Olympiacos and score some goals, against them. That's going to be a real difficult tie for them now.
What did you think the penalty was a bit soft for Brighton? I thought
no, because Compton made contact, didn't he? Yeah. I think the fall was very dramatic, and I think that was considered in the VAR review. But yeah, you can't deny.
But then it was also the Villa one in the first half. Ramsey, I think went down, didn't he? It was a similar sort of challenge, to be honest.
True. Yeah.
And it was one. I think it was an example of, well, VAR aren't going to overturn it. If they're not, the referee not given that Brighton penalty, I don't VAR would have overturned it either.
No, I think in real time I didn't shout penalty when I saw it, and I think if you see it at normal speed, it's only when you slow it right down again that you think, yeah, there is contact, and the timing is slightly off. But when you slow everything down, the timing looks off, doesn't it? You have to be picture perfect to make sure that VAR doesn't rule it out. And like you say, if the ref hadn't have given that penalty in the first place, I don't think VAR would have contested it either. So. Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? But Villa, very lucky, aren't they, to still be in the driving seat for top four, I think. But looking at the bottom of the table, I mentioned in the intro, Forest have got something to finally sort of cheer about and smile about at the end of this really stressful season. And obviously, they've still not heard anything about the points appeal to the Premier League, so we don't know if they'll have any points added on yet. I guess you have to assume that they won't, really, and just that's probably the best mentality to have. But we said, didn't we, beating Sheffield United, and that might be it for the relegation race. And they won 3-1. And I know Sheffield United were already relegated, so there's an element of mentally, it's probably not a game they're going to be up for. But Forest had to be. They had to be quite disciplined, and they had to take their chances. And they really did. And I think one player in particular kind of embodied that, didn't he? Callum Hudson-Odoi, he's coming into form again, looking fantastic for them this season, despite all their off-field struggles. He's been a shining light, and in this game, he took it by the scruff of the neck, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, he's been, we've mentioned him a few weeks ago, didn't we? We've mentioned his transfer fee, and obviously his history of that transfer fiasco with, obviously, Bayern Munich were looking to buy him for 40, 50 million.
Yeah,
and obviously Chelsea turned it down, and then obviously got rid of him for pittance to Forest, and it's been to Forest's gain. He's been superb. We always knew he was a huge talent when he was a young lad. Obviously had that success with England under 17s when they went and won that championship as part of that team with Jadon Sancho, and he was the star in that team. We always knew the potential was massive, the ceiling's so high, and it was a question of whether he could sort of reach that and fulfill that potential. And he's showing what he's all about. Again, these 2 goals are brilliant. And, it sounds really easy to say, when you're an opposing fan and say, just don't let him cut onto his favourite foot. Don't let him cut in. But it's easy said than done. He just chops the shoulder so seamlessly, and it's a great finish, particularly the first one, because the ball doesn't sit up perfectly at all. Just caresses.
It was hard. Yeah.
Just caresses it, curls it into that far corner. We've seen him do it over and over before for Chelsea and in the youth team as well. So it's really good just to see him kind of having that resurgence of form we knew he was capable of doing it. It's the Forest's game. They've obviously, they look like they're going to stay up at the minute. I don't want to jinx anything, hope Forest fans, but
it's 3 points, isn't it?
Look,
it's still overcomable, isn't it, for the teams below them? But Luton drawing with Everton and Burnley getting thrashed by Newcastle 4-1, kind of, it shows that the teams below them are actually struggling for tiredness and energy now, and this kind of campaign is taking its toll on them. And I think this is where Nottingham Forest can actually flex their squad depth a little bit more, because they've got quality below the first 11, haven't they, that have stepped in when they've needed it. And there were some players on that pitch in the game against Sheffield United that were brilliant. I thought Danilo again, and Murillo, he just played brilliantly. He had another one of those games, didn't he, when nothing passed him. And I don't think the relegation rivals have got that. And I don't think this will be the last of the points that Luton and Burnley drop either, with the last couple of games left of the season, do you?
No, they've not got an easy game, not easy running, to be honest. We did say, didn't we, Forest got more favourable running with these last few games. And look, we said that we felt Luton had to beat Everton on Friday, didn't we? And obviously just came up short there, just to give them that, I think just to give them that energy and belief, because I think if they could have won that game, it would have, could have made it really interesting. And let's be honest, obviously, it's still 2 more. There's still 2 more games to go. I mean, anything can happen. So we'll see what happens. But I do think now that Forest will stay up. Do you know what? One thing. Do you think they'll be questioning whether Nuno's the right man in the summer? Let's be honest. This we've known that this ownership have done crazy things.
I think so, and I don't think they'd be wrong to consider their options as well, do you? Because I mean, they've got a team of players that are super talented. I don't think they're going to need much adding to it as well to make it a mid-table team. They should be doing better. They should be scoring more goals. Maybe defensively they need a bit more support, but I think generally it's a really well-balanced team. And going forward, I think the quality they've got is brilliant. Awoniyi at his best is brilliant. Chris Wood's actually proved an able deputy this season. Obviously, Anthony Elanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi have been fantastic. There's been so much attacking threat there. It's just a case of set pieces for a start, which I know they're going to focus on. But that starts on the training ground, doesn't it?
I think you're right about the defence. I think they probably just need an experienced head in there. When they've had Bolly in there, actually, they look a little bit more assured, I think. Just somebody's there to sort of guide those younger players around in the likes of Murillo, Nico Williams. And I think it just gives them that little bit more structure. And I think that's probably what they need. Probably someone...
A goalkeeper as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it'd be fascinating to see what they do in the transfer window. I think, attacking-wise, they'll probably be questioning whether Chris Wood's missed a lot of big chances these last few weeks. A lot of big chances. And, that could come back to bite them. You never know. But I think they'll be potentially looking for another striker. One, he's obviously had his fitness problems again this season. So I think they should be looking for another striker, to be honest.
You still not really answered the question about whether Nuno's the right man, though. Do you think they should consider their options? Do you think that's harsh on him, considering the kind of hand he's been dealt this season? Or do you think that they're probably fair to kind of look elsewhere and think maybe there's a better coach for this team?
I think when they made the decision to obviously get rid of Steve Cooper, I think they gave him enough time to sort of make his adjustments and kind of put his imprint on this team. But I don't know whether there's been a massive improvement, to be honest. I think it wouldn't surprise me if they did look to make a change. But they obviously need to start putting the feelers out now. I mean, the likes of, you mentioned Ruben Amorim. We've, mentioned a few weeks ago about him and the talks with West Ham. There's no reason why they shouldn't be looking at play like this. This is a massive club, Forest. Like the amount of history they've got, there's no reason why they shouldn't be an attractive proposition to him, like coaches of his prestige. And I think they should be looking. They should definitely be open to the idea of it.
I think so. Well, you mentioned West Ham there, which I'll move on to next quickly. They got absolutely smashed 5-0 by Chelsea, who seem to be getting better as the season wears on, don't they? So before we talk about West Ham and their limping to the finish line this season, despite being in the top half of the table and having a fairly good season on the whole, they're really struggling to close the season out, aren't they? But Chelsea, we said last week, didn't we, how much of an enigma they can be as a team, but also the talent that they've got, and if they are all blended in the right way and the team's balanced, they perform. And it all came together against West Ham really brilliantly, didn't it? 5-0 win. That first half against them, I thought Chelsea were fantastic. Some players really coming to the fore. Cole Palmer, what's his value now? They've got some real assets there. So I think Chelsea could realistically and feasibly challenge for the top 6 at this rate, looking at the way their form book's going at the minute, because they're probably the form team in that area just below 5th place, aren't they?
I think you got a question like what could have been, because you look at those teams, Newcastle, Chelsea, United, below Villa and Tottenham. We could have had an absolutely fantastic race for the top 4 if those teams showed a bit more consistency. We've seen Chelsea do it at times this season. They've actually put together some good results against particularly some of the bigger teams, with the exception of that Arsenal game the other week, which was an absolute terrible performance. But we've seen them, put teams to bed like we saw in this game. They've been absolutely ruthless and efficient with their finishing, and Cole Palmer is absolutely at the centre of that. Again, in the absence of Enzo Fernandez, I've seen a lot being bandied about whether they're actually a more functional team without him in the team, and whether Conor Gallagher actually looks a better player without him in that midfield.
Not just him, but there's a few players in that team that sort of seem to benefit with him not being there. Caicedo's the biggest beneficiary for me. I think he could do his job really well without second guessing who's going to be playing that defensive role, that deeper role with Enzo Fernandez, because I think there's doubt about who plays that role when they're both in the team. I think Madueke is a lot more free when he knows that behind him is covered. And Gallagher as well. He keeps scoring, he keeps assisting, and is such an energetic midfielder that, again, I think that's nullified by Enzo being there as well. Is Enzo the problem? No, I just think it needs to be either Caicedo or Enzo Fernandez. That's probably the balance is right when it's one of them, not both.
Yeah, I do think there's a little bit of instability in there in that midfield. I don't think it's as balanced as it probably could be. But yeah, Gallagher, I think we've seen him. He's been a real bright light at times this season. Miles was mentioning about feels like he should be in and around that England team a little bit more often, and has more than enough ability to be able to do a role. But I think when Enzo's not in that midfield, actually Gallagher he offers more going forward. It feels like he's able to be a bit more productive in that final third. So it'll be interesting see what they opt to go with going forward, because obviously spending over 100 million for a central midfielder and then not playing him in the team isn't probably going to be very beneficial to the club, really.
Well, I think that seems for me like Chelsea's problem area is midfield, because I think Nicholas Jackson, we've both rated his chances of fitting in the Premier League eventually. And he's actually, on paper, had a really good season for goals and assists. But there's just been some games where he seems to have really struggled or misfired a little bit and lacked confidence. So I don't think going forward Chelsea will struggle. But I just think that midfield balance is crucial. I think the best teams have a really well-balanced midfield. And getting that right will be key for Pochettino if he keeps his job. Because there are all the midfielders are talented. And you're right about Conor Gallagher as well. I think his England prospects have been enhanced definitely by the way he's finishing this season. And if it's a straight shootout between him and, for example, Jordan Henderson, how many England fans would side with Gallagher? It'd be all of them, you'd imagine. But I think it's probably him and Kobbie Mainoo are kind of in line for that energetic midfielder role, isn't it, going into the Euros for England. But for Chelsea, the fact they've even considered it in the past selling Conor Gallagher seems ludicrous, doesn't it? The way Pochettino puts his trust in him, and the way I think the teammates around him know he's going to do a job, and that he's going to find the pass and he's going to make himself available and run kilometres per game. He's one of them players, them midfielders, that kind of adds an extra level of old school energy to a midfield like Steven Gerrard used to do in some ways.
Yeah, Pochettino's definitely got a lot out of him. You can see that this season. I think he's obviously put an arm around his shoulder, and he's shown that he trusts him. I think that's probably instilled a lot of confidence in him as well. Like you mentioned there, in that England team, he's a different profile of midfielder. I feel it's probably True. What England have in there at the minute. So I think that's a bonus, really. That you mentioned Mainoo's completely different kind of player to Gallagher. He's going to go in there and dictate play and calm things down when it needs to happen. And then Gallagher is a bit more of an energetic sort of starter midfielder who's obviously going to be robust in the challenge, can carry the ball really well, and then can offer, a lot of threat in the final third at times. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how he goes. And let's be honest, you can't see him leaving in the summer. I know there was all those rumours, wasn't there, early in the season about, I think Spurs were linked with him, weren't they? I think was talking to Newcastle as well. I'd be really shocked if he did.
Well, news of Thiago Silva announcing that he's leaving Chelsea at the end of the season as well. That would be a difficult one to replace for them, won't it? Because defensively, they haven't had many players stand up and be counted. And I think since they lost Rudiger as well, I don't think they've found a player other than Thiago Silva that's really been that experience and that kind of steel that defence needs. So they probably need to invest in centre-back as well in the summer, don't you think?
Yeah, they need someone more experienced, you'd say. They've obviously got some promising players in there, the likes of Chalobah, Disasi, at times who've played well this season, but they've also looked a little bit vulnerable at times as well, and
Definitely.
made a few mistakes along the way, which you kind of expect with younger players as well. But they definitely need experience that in there just to shore things up at the back, because that we've seen them ship a lot of goals this season.
Yeah. It's been their undoing, hasn't it, in many ways? But let's focus on their opponents in this game, West Ham, who, again, endured like a nightmare first half against them. They felt like they were anonymous throughout that first half. The defensive players were just letting the Chelsea players pass through them, pass around them. There was barely any running. There was jogging for the most part from a lot of the players, all of them including the midfield players. They didn't run those extra kilometres. I don't know if it's because they've got nothing left to play for this season, or whether they've just had enough of the instructions they've been given. But David Moyes was so frustrated on the touchline. You could see the anger coming out of him, saying, "You're not doing your jobs." And I think in his post-match, he was saying that. That's even more worrying, I think, for Moyes, that the players are actually... He's telling them, these are your instructions, and you're not carrying them out. When the players stop carrying out the manager's instructions, that's kind of the writing on the wall, usually, for a manager, isn't it? Are you worried for David Moyes? Because that West Ham team on paper is pretty good, isn't it?
It looks like, 99% certain that they're going to replace the manager, doesn't it? Let's be honest.
It's such a shame, though. And Moyes even said that managers are having their futures decided after a few games of poor performance, and then the fans turn on them. There's no other role in any other job in any walk of life where that would be the case. So mentally, that's difficult for managers to contend with. But they didn't get it wrong tactically necessarily in this game. I just think they didn't show up. That's on the players for me.
There's not been many teams in this league that have frustrated me more than like being a United fan, watching United. Yeah. You don't know what you're going to get at all. But I think that's the same with West Ham.
Yeah,
you watch them sometimes. They can take teams apart with some of the players they've got. But they've equally, really responsible with, getting these sort of performances as well, having these sort of performances as well, and falling apart. You look at how they fell apart against Arsenal earlier in
all the London derbies. I think they've shipped about 5-6 goals in most of the games against London opponents as well, which is a mad statistic. But again, when they collapse big time, don't they?
Yeah. Was it Palace? Was it last week or the week before?
Yeah, there's been a few 5-0s. I think there's 6-0 in there as well. So yeah, when they collapse, they do just kind of down tools, it feels like, and let it happen to them.
Absolutely. I think the main thing for me is that the club has now shown a lot of ambition. Obviously, they got rid of Rice for big money in the summer. They've reinvested that money into some top players. Obviously Kudus, Paquetá, Alvarez, who is a great player as well. They're finally showing this sort of ambition, I think, and looking to climb up the table and obviously compete for these European places. Even potentially, aspire to get into those top four, because, we say about obviously Villa and how we couldn't see that coming. There's no reason why West Ham couldn't get to that level with some of the profile, the players that they have. And I think fans have finally got fed up that they feel as though the coach, the manager, doesn't match the ambition that's been spent, the money that's been spent on the actual team, the first team, the squad, and he doesn't suit the kind of brand of football that they want to see.
Yeah.
You can see what I do feel a bit bad for him because I think he's done a good job. You know, you look at obviously last season how that ended. It was a real, you know, we felt like that was the end of the road for him. It would have been a good time to obviously see an end to his tenure at the club. But I do feel bad because I don't actually think he's done that bad a job. To be honest,
No.
I think there has been some.
No.
But you've also got to question that team as well. You've got to question the mentality of the players. You can't obviously just take your foot off the pedal because you feel like the season's petered out and the manager's going to change, because that's just not acceptable.
It's a shocking mentality, isn't it? I think that's one thing that the next coach, because there probably will be a change of coach, I think, for West Ham in the summer, they need to consider that attitude and whether that's something they want in their squad as well, because I can't even pinpoint any players in particular that appear to have down tools. It felt like it was a collective team. I can't be bothered today. Like, I don't want to play today. It was literally a feeling of I don't want to play, and Chelsea just took full praised So for all we've praised Chelsea, I think this game was majority West Ham just not showing up, which for fans must be so disappointing after a season that it's kind of been quite positive on the whole.
It has, yeah. It's been pretty positive. I think there's a couple of players in there. I think this game in particular, I thought Jarrod Bowen played well. I thought he was really unfortunate not to score. Obviously, he hit the bar 3 times.
Yeah, true.
And he's a player who's consistently performed this season. I think, for me, I think he's been the best player, along with Paquetá at times, who's done really well as well. And you've got to say, well, if you're looking at it, I think if you're Bowen as well this summer, you're probably looking at, he's obviously not a spring chicken anymore. He's obviously in his prime years in his career. You're probably looking at it and you're wondering what manager's going to come in, because do I want to be a part of something big, potentially, you know, more promising? I think there'll be teams.
I think he could find himself in a lot of better Premier League teams, better equipped Premier League teams to get the best out of him as well, and where he could actually potentially win some silverware, because he deserves it. Like you said, he was one of the few players that ran and tried today. And I think West Ham's expected goals was like 0.8 for the game versus Chelsea's 4.1 or something like that. But all of that 0.8, I think, came from Jarrod Bowen hitting the bar, didn't it? And hitting the woodwork. So, yeah, it was literally a one-man band at times. But, yeah, disappointed for Hammers fans. And I feel for them, to be fair, because then nobody wants to finish a season the way it feels like they're going to finish it at the minute. So I've just seen the breaking news that Julen Lopategui has been confirmed as the next West Ham manager at the end of the season. So while we've been talking about David Moyes and his job being safe, I've just seen the news that Lopategui deal's been agreed, which, to be honest, sounds like a smart move for West Ham, doesn't it? And we were saying the context of our conversation earlier seems completely different now, but Lopategui seems like a manager who's going to have the players from the start and the budget from the start that he didn't get at Wolves, and it seems like a good match.
Yeah, big catch for them, that really. You know, comes with a massive reputation. I think he'll do a really good job. And you mentioned there, probably didn't get the offer to do the kind of job that he anticipated at Wolves. He's got the resources now at West Ham, so we'll see. It's quite exciting times actually for West Ham fans.
I must say, I have to feel even more sorry for David Moyes now, because this has been announced while he's still in a job. I think that's pretty gross.
It's premature, yeah. It's not nice, is it? Let's be honest.
One team I think that will definitely be looking at next season in a more positive light is Ipswich Town, Dave. Let's have a talk about them before we wrap up the pod, who sealed their promotion back to the Premier League, first time in 22 years, which is mad. 2 promotions in a row. They've won, or rather they've lost 10 games over the course of 2 seasons, and cumulatively got more points than Manchester City. Of course, the seasons are longer in the EFL. But Kieran McKenna has worked absolute wonders. If you look back at some of the comments when he was appointed, there were so many that were kind of mocking him, really, and his links with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and the tenure at Manchester United, how it didn't really prove to be that successful. But if you speak to anybody that's worked under him and with him on the training ground, they'll all say how much his focus is on coaching and making players better. And you look at the money that Ipswich have spent, you know, it's a few £1 million over the course of two seasons, isn't it? It's not a lot. So he's actually coached these players to get to levels that almost won the title. They're only a point behind Leicester City when it came to the end of the season. So what an achievement for Ipswich.
Absolutely. It's ridiculous, isn't it, really, to be honest? You mentioned there just 10 games lost over the course of 2 seasons. And I watched them in the game in midweek against Coventry, and I thought that they played so well considering the situation. Obviously, it was real high pressure situation still, and they played so well considering there was so much on the line. And I've been so impressed just the way they played throughout the season. Like you mentioned, Kieran McKenna, the job that he's done, I think he's got to get so much credit. And let's be honest, he's going to look so good on his resume. Such a young coach still, coming from obviously United, and he had obviously a lot of promise back then, a lot of praise, I think, behind the scenes, saying that this is a coach who's got a lot of ability, and he's shown it in his first real high profile job, instantaneously getting them promoted last season, again this season. But he's shown that he's able to manage many different players, especially younger players. Obviously, being under 18s coach at United, he did really well with them. I think with the players, especially the younger ones, Sarmiento, Hutchinson, Leif Davis, have all played absolute pivotal roles in this team. And I think you've got to give a lot of credit to that recruitment team. If you look at the players they brought in, the likes of Kiefer Moore, Hutchinson, and Sarmiento, they've scored really important goals. They've really the competition for places in that team, and you look at the strength they've got in depth. Even the players on the bench that can come on and make a difference have come on and 100%. Really scored some important goals. They've scored a lot of late goals as well. So, I'm over the moon for them. I think they've got a good. They've really got a lot of promise. I think for next season, I think there's a lot of hope for them. And you look at the way they play; they're absolutely amazing to watch. The way they play their football. I can't wait to see them next season. And to be honest, I'm just going to put it out there. And I hope Ipswich fans aren't upset by this, but I kind of hope that Norwich go up as well, because I'd love to see Ipswich versus Norwich in the Premier League again. I think that would be absolutely superb.
Yeah, it would. But let's keep it back on Ipswich, really, because I think there's a lot of snobbery from Premier League fans when they see promoted teams come up, and they always look at the squad and try and judge if there's any stars there, and if there's anybody that's going to score loads of goals. But I feel like there's shades of Luton with Ipswich, and that they've been promoted quite quickly and not invested a huge amount, and a lot of that core squad from League One is still there, isn't it? And a few smart loans have been thrown in because the budget's been fairly tight. So it does beg the question, and this is me being a Premier League snob again, saying, are Ipswich strong enough, and how much can they reinforce in the summer? Because there is only so much coaching you can do when the players aren't Premier League quality. So any of those players do you think that Ipswich are going to bring up with them that you think, they could really help them stay in the Premier League?
I don't see why not. I think Leif Davis is a top player. I think he's so good. Going forward, he's really threatening on that wing. He offers so much in terms of the way that they play, carries the ball up and down the ring, the endless energy. I really like him as a player, and I think there's going to be a lot of clubs interested in him. I'm so glad that they're going up, because I think Premier League clubs will be looking at him. I think he's had that good of a season. I think Wes Burns he's performed really well this season as well. Morsey's been superb, and I think there's a lot of unfounded talent up and down the football pyramid that potentially slips through the net, and that sometimes they just need that opportunity. I mean, you look at Luton this season, some of the players that have actually risen to the occasion and risen to that stage. There's no reason why these Ipswich Town players don't deserve an opportunity, and they're more than capable. They've got a lot of potential. There's no reason why they shouldn't get that chance. I think just to have this experience and go and enjoy it. I think there's going to be no better coach than to show them the way. Obviously, Kieran McKenna. I think how calm he looks and the calmness that he instills in this team. You look at him on the touchline, it doesn't show any sort of emotion in terms of like he's under any pressure at all in a game, does he? He just looks like he's always in control.
I think that's one of the things that they really need to learn from this season, from the teams that are coming back down again, is that there's a way of adapting to Premier League football, and you can't really be too stubborn in the way you commit to a style. Burnley found that out. Although I think Burnley have improved and got better as the season's gone on, they should have adapted from day one. And I think Ipswich need to have that reality check and say, look, our quality is going to be below the teams even that are going to probably be 16th or 15th in the table. And they need to bridge that gap by just being harder to beat. And I think if there's any coach that's going to do that, it's probably Kieran McKenna, who, you know, he knows his players inside out. He knows their strengths, and he's going to have to find a tactical way of nullifying opponents, but also putting the ball in the back of the net. So maybe an extra goal scorer to try and clinically finish those chances that they do get. But just be very defensively organised, I think, and that's what McKenna will look to do. But yeah,
I think that's
in the Premier League for the first time in a while is exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's it. Probably the only thing you can question is whether the strikers can do it at Premier League level. You know, obviously Kiefer Moore's done a great job at times, you know, for Wales on the international stage, and he's not exactly been the most prolific at Premier League level.
No.
We don't know whether George Hurst can do that yet or not. I've always been, you know, touted as a big talent from very young down the age groups. When he obviously started at Sheffield Wednesday, went to Leicester, and obviously he's been given his opportunity in Ipswich, and this last couple of seasons he's looked the part. Hutchinson's, you know, is still very young. There's a lot of young players in here that haven't had that experience yet, but I think they should be looking to teams like Luton, like you mentioned. I think they probably need to invest in probably a couple of defenders. I think they could still improve there a little bit defensively. I think it would be absolutely brilliant if Luton go down, which I can't hope they don't, because I'd love to see them stay up as well.
You said that about Forest.
I know.
Can't have both.
I can't have both, and I don't want either of them to go down. There's other teams in the league I prefer to go down, but it's Tiedemann Mengi at Luton. I think he'd be a great acquisition for Ipswich. I think he'd give them that sort of calmness at the back, and he's great on the ball as well. So it'd suit Ipswich down to a T.
Well, I think learning from the positives of teams like Luton, where they have signed players that look like their careers were kind of finished, like Ross Barkley, and wow, he's had a great season, hasn't he? Andros Townsend, even, you know, these are journeyman Premier League players that could still do something. If Ipswich can find players with that kind of Premier League experience, they might have a good chance of fighting relegation. You never know. But a lot of football to look forward to this week, Dave. We've got European games to wrap up, which will be really exciting. Can Bayer Leverkusen still continue their unbeaten run in all competitions this season? That'd be mad. Can Villa overturn their deficit? Can PSG be stuffed and actually have another rich team out of the Champions League? That'd be amazing. And obviously the Premier League finale is still all to come. So yeah, plenty to talk about, and hopefully I'll have Miles back next week to discuss that with us. But yeah, please do support us on our socials. Whatever you're listening to us on, please hit follow. It makes a massive difference to the algorithm the more people actually follow us. And also leave a review, leave a star rating for us. Hopefully you like what you're listening to, and you can actually support us with that algorithm too. But YouTube is where we kind of get most of our exposure. So hop over to there, hit subscribe, hit like on some of our videos, and see us instead of listening to us. That'd be a huge support too. But until next week, Dave, thanks for your time, and I'll speak to you soon, mate.
Speak to you soon, mate. See you later.
See you later.